Hi guys, welcome to Financialize. My name is Wayne Shlovu. I am a financial advisor. I run my own financial advisory practice. As you know, it's with a company called Liberty. And today's episode is a very hot and bothered topic that I want to be addressing.
What exactly is going to be happening with the taxman and South African influencers and content creators?
Tax specialists seem to agree that SARS has every right to require declaration of gift payments.
You have to declare anything that you are receiving through social media platform.
SARS is starting to tax influencers, and it's a pretty big issue. Now, with this video, I want to be able to answer a couple of questions. Notebook, as you know. So here's a couple of questions that I want to answer this video. How does SARS classify what an influencer is? How will SARS go about doing this? Why does SARS want to do this now? So, first question, how does SARS see influencers? SARS sees influencers as sole proprietors or independent contractors. What's a sole proprietor? A sole proprietor is basically a type of business. It's a form of business in which it's only one person, right? So everything's under the person's name. It's very different from a company or a partnership, because with a partnership or a company, you can technically sue a company without suing the people who own the company. But with the sole proprietor is very different. According to the eyes of the law and according to the courtrooms, the sole proprietor and the person that the sole proprietor is under are basically the same person. So if I'm suing your sole proprietor, I'm basically suing you as well. So that's how they are seen. But here's another thing. They're also seen as provisional taxpayers. What does that mean? It means that according to SARS, social influencers don't make a regular, consistent income. They don't have a salary. So because they don't have a salary, they don't pay for things like PAYE or pay as you earn. So because of that, they have to submit additional documentation when they're filing in their taxes. Most of the time, they're required to file in their taxes in advance, twice in a year. That way, SARS can be collecting tax throughout the year as opposed to just at one point in the year. Next question, how will SARS do this? How will SARS be taxing them? Before we even ask that question, a better question to ask is, what exactly is SARS going to be taxing? Now, a lot of people think it's just going to be sponsorship money, and it will, but it's more than that. SARS will be taxing sponsorship money where they get ad revenue, things like affiliate marketing, yes, but SARS will also be taxing what they call non-monetary income or in-kind income. What does that mean? It's basically income that doesn't come in the form of cash. So for example, if an influencer is getting a sponsorship and then they say to the influencer, hey, look, we will pay you a certain amount of money, just flex our brand, just advertise our brand, but then we'll also give you some of our product. We'll give you some free stuff. That free stuff can be taxed. But how do you tax an item? You tax an item by declaring the amount of money that this item is worth, and then they tax that. So it's not just the money that they get, it's also the free stuff that they get. So it's no longer free anymore. Here's another question. How will SARS do? I know it's one of the questions that I listed, but it's a good question. How will SARS know that an influencer is making a certain amount of money? Well, there's two ways they'll go about doing that. First, and the most obvious way, influencers are supposed to influence the public. Meaning, any kind of money that influencers make, they need to show it in some way. Maybe not tell people that they got paid a certain amount of money, but they definitely have to do what they were paid for. They have to flex whatever they were told they were asked to flex, or advertise whatever they're asked to advertise. And SARS will obviously see that. But another way that they'll go about it is by doing this. Imagine you've got a company here and you've got an influencer there. The company says, okay, cool, we'll pay the influencer money so that she can advertise our brand. The influencer does that, but then here's something that interesting that happens. Let's say the influencer says to you, okay, cool, fine, but I'm not going to pay taxes. I'm just not going to say anything about it, right? I'm not going to say anything about how much money I was paid or any of that. So I'll just be quiet and SARS won't even know. Well, SARS will know. Why? Because SARS is going to tax the business, the brand, and the brand has to list all of the expenses in their financial reports. SARS needs to look at that. Once they look at that, they'll see from the financial reports that, wait a minute, you guys paid an influencer and you paid this influencer this amount of money, but then how come we didn't get any taxes from the influencer for that transaction? That's another way that SARS is going to figure that out. So it's one of those things where people say you can never escape the tax man. That's an example of how they're going to go about that. Last question. Why does SARS want to do this now? Like I said at the beginning, influencers are not a new thing, but why is SARS doing this now? SARS is doing this now as opposed to earlier on before because SARS is always trying to keep up with the economy. The economy is constantly changing. So right now, one of the big reasons why is because most advertising is done through social media. And a good way of going about it is by paying influencers, because they're literally paid to influence the public or the platform that they have built by advertising your products. It's part of something we call the gig economy. So the SARS is actually understanding the fact that the gig economy is actually a really big part of the economy. But on top of that, they're understanding the fact that no, it's actually not fair if we're, back to that example, we're just taxing the business, but we're not taxing the influencer that the business is paying. It doesn't leave these things balanced. So this is also SARS's way of kind of trying to balance everything out. Okay, cool. That's the video. If you're an influencer and you want to figure out a way to minimize the amount of tax that you're going to be paying, because you probably want to do that, right? If you want to do that, give me a DM, hit me up on Instagram, hit me up on all the platforms that you guys are active on. If you know of an influencer, send them this video, send them this TikTok. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, do all those social media things, and I'll see you in the next one.